What is going on, gunfighters? Welcome back to Gunfighter Life, the podcast where we talk about gunfighting the right way, with God at the center, Judeo-Christian values, and real-world, first-hand experience. Now, a lot of times on Gunfighter Life, we just kick back and talk about cool guns, obscure cartridges, things like that, and that's great, and hopefully you guys enjoy that. But today's episode, I think, is one that's practically important for a gunfighter of any kind, or even a practical hunter. Today we're going to talk about stress accuracy under stress. I'm going to plug in the bio. If you normally skip it and you haven't heard it in a while, maybe worth listening to again today, just because it's germane to today's topic. I'm going to put in the bio, and then we'll get into the day's subject. Who am I? A question we should all ask ourselves. I am, first and foremost, a servant of God, made in His very own image, a follower of Jesus Christ. A simple man called by God to the Great Commission to share the good news of Jesus Christ. Next, a little bit about my background and what God has allowed me to do and blessed me to do in life. Grew up what most would consider very poor in the backwoods of the southeastern and mid-Atlantic United States, hunting and fishing. Joined the Marine Corps at 17. Did a couple of combat tours in Iraq. So a decorated Marine Corps combat veteran. Infantry assaultman. After the combat tours, I was an urban warfare instructor for the United States Marine Corps under Mojave Viper. I also served in the U.S. Army, both full-time and part-time National Guard. Also a veteran of law enforcement. I served with LAPD. I was a sworn peace officer, a cop for LAPD. I worked regular patrol assignments and more specialized assignments. One of those more specialized assignments was warrant service, fugitive recovery. Also had some other law enforcement roles. I am an FBI certified firearms instructor and been certified by another 3-letter government agency in a lot of firearms and training things. I've also been a private contractor, worked in the private sector pertaining to tactics and gunfighting and protecting America from enemies foreign and domestic. I served as the commander of a tactical team to stop active shooters in a large metropolitan area. That was our primary mission, to stop active shooters, which sadly are a thing in America today. I've also been blessed to do quite a bit of competition shooting. Started my first formal competitions even before joining the Marine Corps at 17. I had won more shooting competitions than I can remember. I have competed in all manner of disciplines in shooting. I've been blessed to be a state rifle and pistol champion, West Coast regional champion. Like I said, been blessed to win more shooting competitions than I can remember. Mentioned hunting. I've hunted to put meat on the table starting when I was a child. I've also been a professional big game hunter and guide, hunting and slaying all manner of beast. And I don't apologize for that. Humbled to be the host of 3 podcasts. Simple Man Sermons, Alpha Male Podcast, and Gunfighter Life. Obviously, as things not mentioned, I've been blessed to do many other things. But, again, first and foremost, I'm a servant of God, a believer and follower of the Bible, the Word, Jesus Christ. And I don't apologize for that. With that, let's transition into today's topic. Now, yesterday, by God's grace, I was able to go out in the forest and set up a shooting range, do some practice, my accuracy standard and my speed standard. I actually sent myself a text for the idea for this episode, and God provides on the Insider Patreon chat. The guys actually the next day were talking about something very similar we got on this topic. If you want to be a part of the Insider tribe, you can sign up on Patreon. There'll be a link in the show notes, hopefully. Anyway, they were talking about the same thing that I had sent myself a note on the day before. It was mainly talking about a certain video, which I don't have their permission and not affiliated with this podcast, so I'll leave out. But it was a video on basically this, and being able to, on demand, get a good headshot at 10 yards, which I think is totally doable. And I forget what the time limit was, but it was very generous. I would say very doable. As far as marksmanship goes, for a lot of people, most decent shooters can do that. But can they do it under stress? And this is why I asked if you'd listen to the bio today, if you normally skip it. And you may have deduced from the bio that I have shot a time or two under stress. Marksmanship, good marksmanship skill is elementary in shooting well. If you put that in practical terms, this is gunfighter life after all. That's the name of this podcast, Gunfighter Life. Gunfighting is stressful. I don't know a better way to put that. I guess elegantly understated, but gunfighting is stressful. You know, you give me an average, there are better or worse in any category, but you give me an average 12-year-old girl that's never shot a gun before. In an afternoon, I can have her reliably making headshots with a handgun at 10 yards. I'm fairly confident in saying that, and it depends on the individual. Some people of any subcategory are better or worse, but I'd say average. You give me 10, probably more than half of them I could get in an afternoon, getting good, reliable headshots with a handgun at 10 yards. That in and of itself is not crazy hard marksmanship. Doing it under stress, depending on the stress, depending on the environment, maybe. Now, I heard from the bio, I was the commander of a tactical team. I've also been a professional firearms instructor, NRA, FBI. I've taught civilians, military, law enforcement. I've taught other people's curriculums. I've taught at one of the biggest shooting schools in the country professionally. Anyway, I got flack for years from a lot of the students, a lot of the peers, and that I would push them on the accuracy requirements. I would push them on distance. I wouldn't push them nearly as hard as I pushed myself on that. My general accuracy standard are headshots at 50 yards. And my standard for a long time was 21 in a row. I reduced that. My wife wisely pointed out that I spent a lot of time and sometimes a lot of ammo if I couldn't get 21 in a row at 50 yards, especially on a windy day. I think 10 in a row is sufficient. It means I have to be more than 90% accurate. If I have any fundamental flaw in my form, if my marksmanship fundamentals have degraded, it will quickly show in that, let's say, in that set of parameters. Somebody asked me in the Patreon chat when I brought that up, they said, what is your time limit? And that's not a time limit thing. That is purely a mastering the fundamentals of marksmanship drill. And I've said something akin to this for years, and I said something like this in the Patreon chat today. If you can't shoot good slow, don't expect to shoot good fast. That's not how that works. That is purely a mastering of marksmanship, making sure my form is right, my grip is right, my stance is right, even my shoulder tension is right, my support side grip is equal and properly aligned right and left. All that stuff comes into play at that distance with a handgun, because I want to build on a firm foundation. If my marksmanship fundamentals suck, if I'm barely getting center mass hits at 7 yards, what happens under stress? There's going to be imperfections probably introduced in my grip and all that stuff. But the better my foundation is, the more, let's say, degradation I can withstand in my fundamentals and still make a good hit. If it's hard for me to make a headshot at 10 yards anyway, if I've just done a dynamic room entry there's a bunch of loud gunfire all around me because I'm now in a gunfight, I might get some degradation on my fundamentals. The more degradation I can withstand and still be able to get good hits, the better. If I start with crappy foundation and then it starts to get washed away, that's just even worse. And I don't know how much degradation that's going to be. But as I said, as elegantly understated as I can make it, gunfights are stressful. So something that's not often talked about, that's probably not as cool on Instagram. Everybody wants to shoot fast, and I can shoot fast. It's not a replacement of shooting fast. As I mentioned, I've won more competitions than I can remember, and most of those are speed shooting competitions, although I do have some precision competitions in there. But one of those, and one of my favorites, is Steel Challenge. I've heard that referred to as drag racing with a pistol, and that's pretty much what it is. It's fast. There's a saying in most practical pistol competitions, you can't miss fast enough to win. I didn't shoot really fast and then get hits. I got hits while going fast. Getting hits is the key there. And getting hits under stress. I said I got kickback for when I was the commander of a tactical team. We'd have a certain set of quals, and I would have the men run several different quals. Some of those were my call. Some of those were outside agency things for liability. A lot of the guys would have trouble getting hits on a man-sized silhouette with qual time stress, let's call it that. 25 yards, they start throwing shots at 25 yards. Would, of course, make an excuse, a lot of them, that you're never going to get in a handgun fight at 25 yards. To which I would say right now, you don't know the future. You can't see the future. If that's the gun that you have, you had better be able to handle the situation with the gun that you have. And if you think it's hard to get a hit on a man-sized silhouette at 25 yards on, let's say, the FBI qual, I think your fundamentals are going to get better than that or worse than that at, let's say, 10 yards when you've just been shot in the leg and you still have to return fire. Or when you're, let's say, dragging your buddy by his rear plate and his body armor out of a room and trying to get hits one-handed. That stuff happens. And the better fundamentals, the better accuracy you start with, again, the more it can degrade, can still get good, effective combat hits. Stress accuracy. If your goal, I would say, is, and this is something I would encourage for all concealed carry, handgun holders, whatever, shoot the FBI qual. Have one on record. Have witnesses to it. Ever did get in a shooting, and I hope that you don't. Any jury made up of the average citizen is going to have heard of the FBI. And whether rightly or wrongly, they're going to assume that the FBI knows how to shoot. You can show and demonstrate and prove that you passed an FBI qual on such and such a date. That's a good thing, and I can't see how that would be detrimental. Have a independent witness. Easy in today's digital age to take a picture. Have a witness, an RSO, range safety officer, sign and date the target. Take a picture of it. Hopefully you never need it. It's also a good measure for you as to your marksmanship skill. I hope that you can shoot that clean, meaning zero down. If you're prepping for that, let's say you want to prep for the FBI qual, well, some of my advice is do it all on headshots or do it all on an index card. Make that your goal. And then if it comes for real and you got a little bit of stress because it's qual time, if you degrade by quite a bit, you're still going to be great. If you're just barely getting hits at 25 yards in that giant bottle silhouette in practice, don't be surprised if you throw a lot more come qual time. Especially with my guys were qual where their job depended on it. If they failed, let's say 2 in a row, they may be out of a job. Families and mouths to feed, that's a big deal, professional gunfighter. That is stress. That is not the same amount of stress as being in a gunfight. It's nowhere near the same amount of stress of being shot or seeing your buddy shot or die in front of you. If you're just practicing enough to, let's say, pass the FBI qual, to do the bare minimum, I have a whole nother podcast called the Alpha Male Podcast. Do me a favor and probably don't listen to that because you're not an alpha male. Don't just do the bare minimum. What kind of garbage is that? Gonna strive for mediocre? No, you strive to be the best that you can be as a man, as a gunfighter, as a warrior. If whatever FBI statistic, and I can talk about how flawed those are, say that the average gunfight is, 3 yards or 5 yards or whatever, are you going to train to just get hits at 5 yards? Going to be happy with just the bare minimum? I was a law enforcement officer. I was at LAPD. I even worked on an interagency task force with the feds. Are you going to strive to be the average police officer? Because the average police officer is not a gunfighter. And that might give me a lot of flack, but they're not. They're administrators. They're basically clerks that happen to carry a gun in case they need it. They are not gunfighters by definition. Just like the FBI, it's the Federal Bureau of Investigation. It's not the Federal Bureau of Gunfighters. A lot of big agencies, LAPD, the FBI, they'll have like a special corps of guys, HRT or whatever, that are gunfighters. But the average FBI agent, the average cop is not a gunfighter. Some of them are, but not the average. Are you content with being average? You might proverbially look at yourself in the mirror and decide whether that's you or not. And then man up and push yourself to be better. Better than the average cop. Better than your average investigator in the FBI. And that's not hard to do. A lot of agencies qual twice a year. You had better be practicing. Consider yourself a Minuteman, a well-regulated, meaning well-trained Minuteman, your own first responder. You had better be practicing more than that. And that goes for you as a police officer too. Just because your agency says you only have to qual twice a year, you had better be practicing more than that. If you actually consider yourself a gunfighter and not a clerk that carries a gun because you have to. But if you're listening to this, I assume you either consider yourself one or aspire to be a gunfighter. So act like one and be better. One of the recommendations I have from one of the patrons, if you're practicing, I said, 1, don't measure your corn in somebody else's bushel. Don't make my standards your standards. Work up to that, but a good thing to practice would be headshots at 25 yards. Then if you want to run a couple of quals, which this guy likes to do, I believe, body shots at 25 yards. And if, let's say, it's qual day and you mess up your draw stroke, you have to adjust your grip, or whatever circumstance it is, you're still going to be able to get good, solid center of mass hits at 25 yards because you're used to practicing on a head. If your fundamentals degrade because you got a bad draw or a slightly worse grip or something like that, even if it degrades by double, you're still going to get good, solid hits at that distance. And again, you don't know what the future holds. I don't know what the future holds. You may have to get a good, solid hit with your handgun at distance because the situation warrants it. You can't get closer, and that's what you have on you. That's the reason we carry handguns. Not because it's the best tool for the job. It's almost never the best tool for the job. But it's a tool you generally have on you. And if you're going to trust your life and the lives of your neighbor, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. To that, most importantly, to your skill and to that tool, you had better be good with it. Going back to stress accuracy, make your own standard and always push yourself. Practice. I don't want, like I said, don't measure corn in somebody else's bushel. I'm leery to mention any of my other standards. One of them is several shots in a row in a certain time on a head plate, a head-sized target, at 25 yards. That's a good balance for me of speed and accuracy. Enough time that it makes it somewhat stressful. Now, a lot of that's artificial stress. Because if I miss, nobody's going to, strap me to a pole and give me 40 lashes. It is some stress. Whatever that is for you. For you right now, it could be having to draw and get a good, solid headshot at 10 yards in a few seconds. In most instances, I would say, start with body shots. The Mozambique drill became a standard for a reason. 2 to the chest, 1 to the head. That's often the right answer, but not always. Sometimes the right answer is draw an immediate headshot. Don't just practice what looks cool on Instagram or what looks super fast. It's really cool. It looks super fast, but as a gunfighter, you should practice the things that are a little bit harder and some of the things you're not good at. How about that? Stress accuracy. A lot of times people worry too much about mechanical accuracy. This gun is, let's go to rifles. This AR can shoot, 1-inch groups. Well, this AR can shoot half-inch groups. When's the last time you can recall somebody getting in a gunfight with an AR off a bench with a sandbag and rear support? How fast can you make a hit at 100 yards? Standing. Kneeling. Prone. How about when you go kneeling and there's a bunch of rocks on your knees and you have a little bit of artificial stress? Can you get stress accuracy in that environment? How about with a handgun when you're shooting around a left side barricade and you're all kind of torqued and contorted in a way you don't shoot all that often? Stress accuracy. How about when you go to make a really good shot and that's the round that your gun malfunctions? You have to fix it as quickly as you can and then get back up on target after your OODA loop has been disrupted. Stress accuracy. That's important. I'd say for the gunfighter, that's far more important than mechanical accuracy. Not that mechanical accuracy is not important. I like good, accurate guns, as most men do. What's that quote? I believe it's attributed to Townsend Whalen. Only accurate rifles are interesting. And to me, that translates to handguns. Only really accurate handguns are interesting to me. I only really like accurate handguns. But stress accuracy for practical application for a real-world gunfighter, whether you're a civilian, part of a well-regulated, well-armed militia, standing ready to defend your life and the lives of your family, whether you're a police officer that wants to do more than just a bare minimum 2 times a year qualification, whether you consider yourself a survivalist or a prepper, or on your church security team, any one of those things, you see it as your role to provide and protect, to defend yourself and others against enemies foreign and domestic. If you see that as part of your role, stress accuracy ought to be important to you. A couple of ways you might consider doing that are making your targets smaller. I don't like that old adage, aim small, miss small. I really don't, because I don't want people thinking that just because they know that old adage means they can shoot. It doesn't. You can know that and you can aim small and miss really big. You still have to master the fundamentals. Making your targets smaller than they need to be. I just got done dry firing before this episode. I think you should dry fire every day except for Sabbath, your rest day. Like working out, you'd be far better if you do a little bit every day than you go to some massive exercise once a year. Or twice a year, or even once a month. How in shape is somebody going to be if they work out once a month? Anyway, dry firing every day. One of my precision targets is a little tiny part of a brightly colored sticker that's about the size of a pea. Another one that I use for my draw and my movement, like draw stepping left, or draw stepping right, or draw turning left, draw turning right, is about the size of a quarter. Making your targets smaller. Another one that I like a lot is distance. If you're accustomed to getting good hits at 50 yards, then 25 yards, even under quite a bit of stress, is cake to you. If you're accustomed to getting good hits 25 yards, when somebody calls for a headshot at 7, you're like, pfft. When a situation arises where you have to do that, let's say in a class, make a headshot at 7 yards, you're literally telling yourself, I could probably do that with my eyes closed. That is nothing. Train to be the best that you can be. Train for that stress accuracy. Yeah, you might not need it. You may carry a gun and you may have somebody come up to you at a 7-Eleven at 3 o'clock in the morning and try and rob you with a high point at 3 yards. And it may all be, not applicable in your situation. It could be part of your church security team and you might have to take a shot at somebody, get a good headshot at, 10, 12, 15 or more yards. Do you want to train for the minimum, or do you want to train to be the best gunfighter you can be? Are you a guy that just carries a gun, or are you a warrior? Are you content with being average with a gun, or do you actually want to be good? If being a gunfighter were an easy profession, I submit there'd be a lot more of them. I guess that is a good place to wrap up this episode. I planned on talking about gear for stress accuracy and how to kind of leverage that and be good at that. But maybe that should be another episode. I think we're going to wrap this episode up. If you like this episode, even if you didn't like it, maybe it ticked you off, but you actually concede that it's true even though you don't like it, consider helping other people find the podcast. Scroll down and hit some stars. Leave a review if you're on Spotify or iTunes. As I've said in a previous episode, it's not a war crime to look good. If you want to look good when you're shooting or when you're hanging out drinking coffee, check out our store. You can get there. GoodShepherdTraining.com is the website. There's a little shop button up at the top. I don't often mention it, but we do have merchandise if you want a cool shooting shirt or a good tactical verse on your shirt when you're at the range. And as a thank you for listening to this podcast, I am humbled that anybody listens to this. To share the information God has blessed to get me through a I guess, many different careers as a gunfighter and still be drawing breath. And I'm thankful for that, and I hope to pass that on to you. As a thank you for listening, I really am humbled. The tactical tip of the day. This one's going to be for cleaning out magazines. Some magazines are easy to disassemble. Some are not at all easy to disassemble, and sometimes you just don't want to, or you're in the middle of a training class. An easy way is to dump a bunch of alcohol in them and then turn them upside down and shake them out. For all but the most atrociously, obnoxiously rusty or dirty magazines, that should work. Again, just plain old rubbing alcohol. It's cheap. It works. Dump it all over the inside and outside of your magazine. Turn it upside down. Shake it out. Rinse and repeat if you need to. AR mags, pistol mags. If you're training a lot of times in some nasty environments, really pushing yourself, you're going to get dirty. Your gear's going to get dirty and scratch. Your mags are likely going to get dirty. Maybe sandy, maybe muddy, maybe wet. Any of those things, dumping some alcohol in your mag and letting it evaporate, rinsing it out, is a good thing. Anyway, that's your tactical tip of the day. The tactical verse of the day. This is from Leviticus. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Speak to the children of Israel, and say to them, I am the Lord your God. After the doings of the land of Egypt, wherein ye dwelt, ye shall not do. After the doings of the land of Canaan, where I am bringing you, you shall not do. Neither shall you walk in their ordinances. Ye shall do my judgments and keep mine ordinances to walk therein. I am the Lord your God. We talked about not being average, not fitting in. The word holy means set apart. Be set apart, be different. If you look around at today's culture, I don't have to tell you that this still applies today. Don't be like everybody else. Be better. Be set apart. Be holy. For the Lord says, Be ye holy, for I am holy. Be different. Be set apart. With that, men, thanks for listening, and have a blessed day.